Imagine spending hours locked inside a bronze bull, hearing your own screams echo as they're transformed into the bellow of an angry beast. Most people think ancient punishments were about pain, but here's what almost everyone misses. These weren't just punishments, they were experiments on the human body. And the bodies? They reacted in ways that would horrify even the inventors. Here's the twist. Most of what you've heard about ancient punishments is wrong, not just about what was used, but what those punishments actually did inside the human body. By the end, you'll know why these brutal methods worked, failed, or backfired, and what they reveal about your own biology. But first, let's start with the most infamous punishment you've never been told the full story of. Picture yourself in ancient Rome. You are sentenced to the wheel, strapped to a giant wooden cartwheel, limbs exposed. The goal isn't just to hurt you. It's to shatter your bones, but keep you alive. Here's the body science most people miss. Snapping major bones triggers a catastrophic pain response. Blood pressure spikes, heart pounds, and shock kicks in. But the weird part? The body can enter a state called traumatic anesthesia. You might not feel anything for minutes, sometimes hours. It's your nervous system's last-ditch effort to protect you from overwhelming pain. But as the shock fades, pain floods back in, sometimes worse than before. The body starts to break down. Muscles cramp, blood pools, organs begin to fail. Here's what nobody tells you. Most victims didn't die from the blows. They died hours or days later from shock, infection, or dehydration. The real punishment wasn't the wheel. It was what happened after. But the Romans weren't alone in their creativity. Let's jump to ancient China, the Lingchi, or death by 1,000 cuts. Sounds like pure agony, right? But most people have the wrong picture. The cuts were often shallow at first, designed to terrify, not kill. Here's the twist. The body's adrenaline spikes so high that pain perception actually drops after the first few wounds. The real killer? Blood loss and shock, not the pain itself. But there's an even stranger twist. Sometimes, skilled executioners would target acupuncture points to keep victims alive longer. It's a brutal intersection of medicine and torture, using knowledge of the body to prolong suffering. But let's be clear, most death by 1,000 cuts claims are exaggerated. Actual records show many died after just a few. That's the dark irony. These punishments were more about fear and spectacle than effective pain. Now, flip continents. Ancient Persia, the Scaphism punishment. Victims were trapped in hollowed logs, force-fed milk and honey, and left for insects to do the rest. The body's reaction? Uncontrollable diarrhea, dehydration, then infection, organs shutting down one by one. It's not the pain that killed, but the body's failed attempt to fight off thousands of tiny invaders. Here's the hidden horror. The brain stays alert for days, long after the body is overwhelmed. Most people don't realize the psychological torment, knowing you're being eaten alive, may have been even worse than the physical. And that's a theme in almost every ancient punishment. The mind breaks before the body does. Let's test that idea. Look at the infamous Iron Maiden. Contrary to legend, there's almost no evidence it was ever really used in the Middle Ages. But the story stuck for a reason. The fear of being trapped, pierced, unable to move, triggers primal terror. Even the idea can cause the body to react, heart racing, breath short, muscles tensing. That's the catch. Most so-called punishments worked not through pain, but through anticipation. Your brain is wired to panic before the first wound is ever inflicted. Now picture this. Ancient Greece, the Brazen Bull. Prisoners were locked inside, fire lit below. The bronze would heat up, roasting the victim alive. But here's what's never shown. The first thing that happens is suffocation. Oxygen drops, carbon dioxide rises. Before the skin even burns, the brain starts to shut down. The pain comes in waves, first the lungs, then the skin, then deep muscle tissue cooks. But death usually comes faster than the legend claims. Minutes, not hours. And the infamous bull's head acoustics, just a way to dehumanize the screams. It's psychological warfare, both for the victim and for those forced to watch. But Physical pain isn't just a weapon, it's a message to everyone else. That's why punishments were so public. Our brains are hardwired to remember the sight and sound of others suffering. The science backs it up. Seeing pain triggers the same brain circuits as feeling it. But there's a catch. Regular exposure makes people numb, even fascinated by cruelty. That's the dark side. The more society saw, the more extreme punishments became. Now, let's go inside the mind of a victim. First comes terror. The body floods with adrenaline, heart races, pupils dilate. But after minutes, terror turns to helplessness. Cortisol rises, muscles go limp. It's called learned helplessness. Your brain gives up before your body does. That's not just poetic, it's measurable on brain scans. The result? Victims stop resisting, even when escape is possible. And here's the kicker. This is the same psychological process modern science sees in PTSD. Ancient punishments didn't just break bodies, they hijacked the brain's survival systems. But what about the common idea that pain always leads to confession? Here's what modern science shows. Extreme pain makes the brain desperate to say anything to make it stop, even lies. That's why ancient torture rarely got the truth. It got compliance. But for all their cruelty, ancient punishments reveal something we still don't like to admit. The human body is both fragile and astonishingly resilient, and our minds can shatter long before our bones do. Here's the final irony. The more we try to control the body through pain, the more unpredictable and sometimes unbreakable the mind becomes. So next time you hear about some worst punishment, remember, the real story is what happens under the skin and inside the skull. Every punishment in history is a twisted experiment, one that reveals just how complicated, and sometimes courageous, the human body and mind really are. And if you think our bodies are done evolving ways to cope with pain, wait until you see how modern science is hacking the pain response itself. But let's get personal for a moment. What would actually happen to you, your body, if you faced one of these punishments today? First, your genetics would play a surprising role. Some people are born with rare mutations that make them almost immune to pain. The SCN9A gene, for example, can literally switch off pain signals. But don't get too comfortable. These people usually end up with hidden injuries, broken bones, and burns, because pain is a warning system. Then there's the placebo effect, your brain's ability to mute pain just by believing you're safe. In World War II, wounded soldiers were sometimes given saline instead of morphine, and half reported real pain relief. But here's the double-edged sword. The nocebo effect can do the opposite. If you expect agony, your pain skyrockets. So, in a twisted way, the cruelty of ancient punishments was magnified by expectation and rumor. Here's a curiosity loop. Could some victims have survived longer simply because they believed they would? Modern studies show that expectation can extend endurance. Marathon runners, for example, can override pain for hours just by focusing on the finish line. But eventually, biology always wins. No amount of willpower can stop blood loss, organ failure, or infection. Still, the stories of those who resisted, who survived impossible ordeals, became legends, shaping how future punishments were designed. Now, here's a new twist. Some ancient punishments accidentally created medical knowledge. For example, Roman doctors learned about shock and blood loss by observing the wheel, but they also discovered ways to resuscitate people, like cold water immersion. In China, executioners turned healers documented the body's pain thresholds and acupuncture points, data later used for surgery and anesthesia. Persian punishments revealed the dangers of sepsis, leading to early ideas of wound cleaning and honey as an antiseptic. So, ironically, some of the world's earliest medical breakthroughs came from studying suffering. But let's dive into the most overlooked consequence, how these punishments shaped laws and society. In Athens, the horror of the Brazen Bull led to public outcry and reforms. By 500 BCE, such punishments were banned for citizens. Rome, after witnessing mass trauma from gladiator games and executions, started appointing curatores, public officials tasked with limiting visible violence. In China, reports of botched Lingchi executions prompted the government to standardize execution methods, ironically making them less painful over time. So, every time a punishment crossed a new line, societies were forced to confront their own limits, and sometimes to invent compassion. Fast forward, what can we learn from this bizarre history? The biggest mistake people make today is thinking we're immune to the psychology of punishment. Prison design, solitary confinement, even zero-tolerance school policies, these all tap into the same ancient drives to control through fear and pain. But the data is stark. Harsh punishment rarely fixes anything. Recidivism rates climb, trauma spreads, and even bystanders are affected. In fact, the more visible the punishment, the less effective it becomes, just like in ancient Rome. So the next evolution of punishment is happening now, in neuroscience labs. Researchers are exploring ways to block pain without drugs, using electrical stimulation to turn off pain signals at the spinal cord. Virtual reality is being tested as a way to distract the brain so completely that even severe pain becomes tolerable. And the most radical idea: gene editing to erase pain entirely. CRISPR trials are already underway on rare disorders. But here's the ethical loop. If we could turn off pain, would we lose something essential about being human? Pain, after all, isn't just agony. It's a warning, a teacher, sometimes even a motivator. So the real lesson from ancient punishments isn't just about cruelty. It's about the strange, unpredictable dance between mind, body, and society. And as long as humans fear pain more than almost anything else, that dance will keep evolving, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse.